So today we're looking at an LG 42LN5700. It has the exact same symptoms as the Samsung that I showed in my catastrophic backlight failure video. Symptoms would be when you turn it on, you get a quick flash on the screen, you get to see the LG logo here momentarily, and then the TV shuts off. And troubleshooting procedures also exactly the same. If you disconnect the power wire to the backlights, then the TV will turn on and stay on, but of course the screen's not lit. So when taking the screen, the display assembly apart, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's not supposed to be all burned up. Now in this TV I found one bad LED. It was right there. See that everything inside the light box looks fine. I had one shorted LED, and even without removing the lens, you didn't have to, you could see it right away. So there it is to the right. This has been replaced. You can see a big burn mark right in the middle, and the one I've replaced is right here. You can see what it looks like. It's got that little yellow sun in the middle. So it was very easily identified. Now, YouTuber NorCal has already done a very good video on this model. So I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I am going to add a few things to it. I've noticed that most of the lens caps, see, here's a lens cap. Most of the lens caps, or a great deal of the lens caps on these bottom two rows, just fell off. I mean, if you look at these things cross-eyed, they're going to fall off on you. Now, I don't know if that was because this metal is not very thick, and just flexing it caused them to fall off. I only know that they did. So over here I have a whole pile of lens caps that need to be re-glued. I've just gently touched all these others. They don't seem to fall off when I breathe on them, so I'm going to leave those alone. All of these strips light up now, so my next task is to glue the lens caps, put this little reflector ring back on, and put the TV back together. Now I wanted to touch for a minute on how to remove these LEDs. Now, you might think that you could remove the LED with two soldering pistols, or two soldering pencils, one on either side. That doesn't work because, can we see this? On the bottom, on the back side of the LED, there is a center solder tab. And it is very difficult to desolder that center tab when you've got a little soldering pencil on either side. It can be done, but it's very difficult to do without tearing traces and ripping everything apart and doing damage to the strip. So two soldering pencils, not a good idea. That big tab you see in the middle, very difficult to desolder that with just two soldering pencils. So what's our next step? Well, NorCal used a paint stripper. I'd never tried that, so just to see if it would work for me, I tried it. So here's mine. I bought this quite some time ago. I don't know if you can see the price tag. Cost me $39.99. And they say that it can go from 730 to 830 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, let me tell you, you could hold this on that strip till kingdom come. This particular paint remover heat gun is not going to desolder LEDs. Now, the one that NorCal used, he was running on low. This is only a 1-speed, the one I have in my hand here. This is only a 1-speed. It doesn't work. So if you try that method and it doesn't work for you, I'm thinking that your heat gun is not appropriate to the task. So let's see what else we could use. Here's a Hakko 850 hot air station. This works. I would take off that little nozzle and just use it directly off the gun. At the time I got this decades ago, I think this machine was about $500. Now you see similar machines advertised on eBay for about $50. And they have digital readouts, which makes them infinitely more useful than this. But this machine does work. So the hot air that comes out of this is a lot more appropriate for the task than what was coming out of that Black & Decker paint stripper gun that I just showed you. So this works. And this is best of all. This is a Shop Jimmy LED strip rework station. Shop Jimmy's done a terrific video on how to use this. Essentially, you just lay the strip across this hot plate. It takes about a minute or two for the hot plate to heat up, and it takes another 30 seconds or so for the hot plate then to heat up the area of the strip that you're trying to desolder. It will, once it's hot, it desolders LEDs in 5 seconds. And you can desolder a nearby LED in another 5 seconds. Without damaging the strip, it works great, just the way they show you in the video. It's an inexpensive tool. I'm very happy with it. Now, regarding how often you replace the little LEDs in these light strips, here's the amount of LEDs that were replaced here this week. You can see the burned one that's in the LG that we started with. It's right in the center there. This is the most common repair we're seeing these days. Okay, so next I'd like to talk about reinstalling these lens caps. Now, NorCal uses just a tiny amount of super glue. I don't know what kind he's using. I can just tell anyone trying to do this brand, which I've used very successfully on porous materials like cast iron. Need to stop a pinprick leak in a cast iron pipe? Dry it up and drop some of this stuff on the cast iron. It penetrates the cast iron, stops the leak. It's absolutely amazing. But it does not work here. Makes a huge mess, doesn't work here. Take my word for it. Now, the next thing, you cannot try pouring the glue on these little pads. It just makes a huge mess. So what you have to do, there may be something better, is mix up something like this. Nope, not that. Mix up something like this. This is 5-minute epoxy. And then apply just the tiniest little bit from your puddle with a toothpick. And you have to be very careful, because if you position the lens, if it's mispositioned, you're going to get a light shadow on the screen, and you won't like it. So this is a tedious job, and this is actually a lot harder than replacing the LED, in my opinion. Next tip. This, where my burned LED was over here somewhere. I guess it was this one. The burned LED actually smoked the center, this little center cap. The very, very center of that lens was smoked. And so if you look down inside the little hole that's there, it was full of white material and dark material. In other words, the lens cap was not clean. So if you're replacing any smoked LEDs or shorted LEDs, make certain that you clean these. You clean them in the sink with soap and water, an old toothbrush. Make sure they're nice and clean and shiny before you attempt to replace them. Now, let's see how I do. I've got the glue job finished. You notice I had to mix up 4 batches of 5-minute epoxy just to glue that dozen or so lens caps. So some tips on this. You apply the glue with toothpick. And I don't know if you can see that I blunted the end of the toothpick, because if that's a sharp point, then you're going to have a very hard time dabbing the glue on the strips. So first tip is make sure that tip has been snipped. Now, as soon as the glue, you don't have much time, so as soon as the glue starts to get stringy, it'll get stringy and it'll streak off to the side, it's time to mix up another batch. That's why it took me 4 batches just to do a dozen or so lens caps. So we've got it all back together and they seem to be secure. Let's hope. Now, when putting all of your layers back together, prior on disassembly, it's very important. See, here's my little stickers. Top, top one faces out. Make sure you put stickers on everything because it's so easy to get confused when you put everything back together. And then the next thing, you have to be extremely careful that everything is lined up exactly right, that all of these slots are over their tabs. You have to go over every single one with your thumb to make sure that you've got it, that nothing's out of a line. Boy, you don't want to crack that LCD when you put this back together. So check every single one, make sure that they're lined up perfectly, make sure that they're all caught, that nothing's out of the way. Cross your fingers, make sure it's good. Now we'll try putting the screen back on. Okay, the first step to getting the screen back together is to put on this black plastic frame. Now notice I had marked bottom. That made it very easy to get reorientated. You have to make sure that every one of these clips gets locked in. You have to go all the way around, make sure it's just perfectly lined up, that everything goes together just perfectly. If you're labeling it and you're putting it back together correctly, then it goes easy. If it's not going easy, you've got something upside down or backwards or whatever. Looks like this one is all snapped in perfectly, and I should be ready to put the screen on. Now the source driver boards on the screen are going to snap into these clips, and they're going to go into these slots. So it's a good idea to have in mind how the screen has to go on. We're going to have to put it in at an angle from here to get the boards in this slot, or at least sort of lined up. We don't want to stretch the tab chip-on film assemblies and break anything. So just look at it before you attempt it. I think I'll peel my sticker off right now too. So let's look here at the first laydown. You can see that the source driver board is inside of its little tab, and this one is also inside of its little tabs, so that's good. Here's what's not good. We want to make sure we check these things. Do you notice that the corner of the screen is not in its slot? So very carefully, you want to make sure, if possible, I don't know if I can do this with one hand only, this has to lay down exactly right. It can't be out like this, or the screen will crack when you put the rest of it back together. So I'm going to try very carefully to line this up. Alright, it seems to be laying in its plastic frame pretty well now. Here's the corner. Look at this corner. Looks good. Looks good. This corner, which was way out before, just looking pretty good. This corner, believe me, been there, done that. You don't want to go through all this and crack the screen. Just make sure you've got it in its frame as evenly and as square as possible. Let's go on to the next step. Okay, the next step then is to put this metal frame back on. You notice once again I have all the pieces labeled. Even though I've done it 100 times, it's very easy to get confused. So I still label them. It makes it, I'd much rather get it right the first time. So little stickers, that's my advice. Okay, now with this design, the left and right sides go on first, and we have these tab areas, and there's a little plastic tab pointing straight up here. The metal, this metal indent goes on the back side of the tab. I have the same thing here. Be very careful with this. There's also little protrusions that get snapped in right here, and you do that with your thumb. Now notice this little tang, and that suggests to you that the left and right, so you see how it's below, that's going to catch into the top and bottom pieces. So make sure you put your side pieces on first. Well, the TV is all back together. We've got it all hooked up. Let's see how it works. Wow, looks pretty good. Smart TV. There you go. Can't ask for better than that. Now, we have a second one that came in, which is just a slightly different model from this, but has the exact same symptoms. So let's review by looking at that one. Okay, so this one has the exact same symptoms. It's a slightly different model number. It's a 42LN5400. The first one was a 5700. 5700 was made in 2013. This one was made in 2014. And the symptom is that you turn it on, standby LED, which is down here, will blink once. You'll see a little flash on the screen that goes right off. And you prove that you've got a display problem by disconnecting this connector, which feeds the LED backlights. So now if the problem is here, the TV should turn on and stay on. But we have this one all apart. Visual inspection is not helping. But the shop Jimmy tester identified two bad LEDs. This one here, very low ohms resistance, and this one actually lights, but it takes a long time to light. The whole row lights up, and then this one is the last one to light. And since we're testing from left to right, it should be going that way, so I'm going to end up changing this one as well. Alright, we'll get to that. We'll see what happens. Okay, so we replaced the bad LEDs. I've got everything back together. Right here I've got the power cable reconnected. This is the power cable to provides power to the LED section, to the backlight section. So we're going to test it before we go any further. How do we do this? Turn on my power strip, and I'll try to reach under here and turn on the power. And there we go. She turns on. Does not kick out. They're all bright and beautiful. If we don't break anything when we put it back together, it should work. Two absolutely gorgeous TVs. The one on the left, the larger one, is showing an M box. One on the right is a native smart TV showing the LG Smart TV function. They both came out great. There's absolutely nothing to complain about on either one of these. I hope you will be equally successful. And to help you do that, I am going to list all of the tools you need to effect this repair. I've collected the tools that I use to effect these repairs. This will show you what you're going to need to do the same. First, you need a good high quality number 2 screwdriver. Everyone knows that not all screwdrivers are made the same. This is a Sears Craftsman long handled number 2. Works very well on TV screws. Use it all the time. Then you're going to need a number 1 screwdriver. This is a very high quality. I don't know for certain how you would pronounce this name. I believe it's pronounced Via. Works great on the tiny screws you're going to find in LCD LED televisions. Next, you need some sort of a separation tool. This one is a stiff blade Master Mechanic, came from True Value Hardware. Stiff blade paint scraper. And if you noticed, I've rounded the corners. I've used this probably for 30 years or more. This has separated hundreds of Macintosh computer shells, LCD, LED televisions. This is the best spudger money can buy. Forget all those stupid plastic ones. this is what you want. Just round off the edges so that there's no sharp pieces here. You don't want to scratch anything or dig into anything. You will of course need some labels and a pen. For removing the LEDs and testing the LEDs, you'll need a Sharp Jimmy tester. There are other ways. Believe me, this is worth its weight in gold. It makes it so much easier. I highly recommend this. And then you need the Sharp Jimmy hot plate. Again, there are other ways, but this just makes it so much easier. You will need some solder cream or solder paste. I got this kit, I have to say, 25, 30 years ago from a company in Rhode Island. I bought it direct from the company. It's still great. Nothing is hardened up. I still use it. You only use the tiniest little bit. So there's the address. I don't know if they're still in business. I sure hope so, because it's a wonderful product. Now, replacement LEDs. This strip came, get it right here. This strip came from a Funai Magnavox with a cracked screen, so I salvaged it from that TV, and you can see all the LEDs that have been removed here. The one with the X must have been bad. So the ones that were removed right from here were used in the repairs shown in this video. Now be aware that there are different styles of LEDs. These were exactly the same as the LEDs that are in those LG TVs. Other LEDs are quite different and they might not work for you. So it's important to match up the LEDs. You can also buy them, but these were salvaged. And then finally, I guess, alcohol. We need some, this is 91% isopropyl alcohol. Works a lot better than the 70% that's used as rubbing alcohol. You need a toothbrush to clean up all the solder flux that's left behind and get the pad nice and ready for new flux. And I also recommend some sort of screw container, more than one, with a lid on it, so that as you remove the screws from the TV or from various assemblies, each set of screws gets its own container. The base screws go in one container, the cabinet screws go in another, the frame screws go in another. Whatever you're taking out goes in a separate container with a lid, and as soon as you're done, you clamp that lid down. So when this gets knocked down on the floor, the screws don't go flying all over the place. So this is pretty much what you're going to need. I guess if you're only doing one television, you might not want to spend, there's probably $100 worth of stuff here. You might not want to spend this much. If you're doing quite a bit of repairs, it costs $100 is nothing. So I hope you find this interesting. I hope that you're extremely successful in your LED replacements. I'm going to list one more series of videos at the end of this one. There's a guy from England that did a very good job working on some Vestel TVs, if I remember correctly, and those videos are well worth watching for the do-it-yourselfer. So again, I wish you the best, and thank you very much for watching.